Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Welcome to the program. I'm Mark Imperial. Joining me on this segment is Ezra DeWolf. He's an ADHD business strategist and the founder of ADHD Tools. Ezra, welcome to the program.
Hi, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Ezra, tell us a little bit about your work and specifically, who are the types of folks that you help?
Yeah, the folks I help are the people that used to describe me years ago. I was the guy with like 80 GoDaddy accounts of all of the plans I had, and I wasn't really following through the way I had. I was the person who would, I loved doing the work in business. I loved helping the clients, but I would sometimes on the business side, I would let those things slide because of ADHD. And then I learned later in life that was the thing that was going on. So what I do, it's just one very simple problem, that if you learn that you had ADHD later in life, and you're a responsible person and you're not a victim and you've said, okay, fine, I got something to overcome, I got to get through this, and you want to work with some people who've done it before in a business program focused on business results, and that's exactly what we do.
So Ezra, what do you see as the silent cost of unmanaged ADHD inside a growing business?
Yeah, so it can be a few things. So often it's relating to follow through, that at some level, I know this, that nothing is going to determine the success of a business more than the productivity of the business owner. And so when a lot of those things aren't in check, like we have all of the great, brilliant ideas in the world, but often the reason why people fail to like harness those is some of those issues with follow through and consistency. And that's one of the areas where people with ADHD sometimes get held back. I think that it's easy when we have ADHD to look at other folks, and sometimes they think, I think that person's been consistent because they've only had one idea in their life and they just stuck with that one thing. And what do you do if you're that person who generates endless ideas and endless possibilities?
You're known for an expression that makes me curious. You always say, what if your ADHD isn't sabotaging your business, but it's the reason you could scale it? That's fascinating to me. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I the way that I look at ADHD is I think of it is that it is an entrepreneurial trait. I can't help but see when I look at a lot of business owners that if I'm deep down, whether they know it or not, I'm going, okay, these are ADHD types. However, that only happens if we can lean into those zone of geniuses and if we can mitigate the challenges. What happens for a lot of people is maybe they've actually gotten by largely based on that upside on those strengths, but they just haven't had a plan yet to mitigate the challenge. And if you get both of those things in line, that's when things really start to happen. So I think it can be a tremendous advantage, but I'm not somebody who just thinks it's a superpower on its own. It's also our biggest kryptonite if we don't address that other side of it.
That's key. And I could relate as an entrepreneur. We always throw around very loosely. We throw around the terms like, oh, I've got entrepreneurial ADD and I can't pay attention to anything. But now tell us, what do successful ADHD entrepreneurs do differently when it comes to execution and follow through?
Yeah. So I would say that the major difference is that they have found ways to just do that, to lean into those strengths and to mitigate those weaknesses. So when it comes to something like follow through, as an example, some people have done this as a conscious process where they've modeled others, where they figured it out. And some people may have unconsciously picked some of these things up, which is that they find ways of working where they're generating their activity around energy levels rather than specific times a day, where they've maybe overcome some of those challenges related to focus and maybe around impulse control. And if you do those sort of core things behind the scenes, if we actually work on the parts of the brain related to focus, related to impulse control, related to time awareness, suddenly a lot of things just start to become easier. Maybe you're that person who's always, gone through all the Brian Tracy advice, tried to figure it all out, and it hasn't quite stuck for you. And maybe the piece that was missing was actually some of those brain-based components.
Fascinating. What are some of the biggest myths around focus and productivity, when they have ADHD?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest myths that is driven by people without ADHD is the idea that it is a deficit of attention. They even put it in the name. But if you are one of those people, you might have noticed you actually can get into like deep, deep, deep levels of attention where maybe you've actually been able to focus on something and get more done like in a day than others do in a week. And then the challenge, therefore, isn't do we have a deficit of attention? It's about, can we control that attention? Have we learned how to turn it on? And I think one of the things that really holds people back is this idea that, maybe it held us back and we didn't know what was going on, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we are less capable. And again, I think the evidence of that is we can just look at how many successful entrepreneurs are these sort of ADD types.
Ezra, can you walk us through like what changes first in someone's business when they really finally get the right ADHD systems in place?
Yeah, I would say the big thing that changes is people's relationship to the business. The people I work with are responsible people. Even though sometimes maybe they've been dropping balls, they don't like it. So they have been going for years, making sure everything gets done by like gritting their teeth, pushing through, like doing the thing that they hate to do, working outside of their zone of genius. And that can work, but it also can like really tax the nervous system. It doesn't feel enjoyable to work in that way. But on the other hand, if we actually figure out some of these things and find sort of, I think a bit like burning clean energy versus dirty energy. If we're burning the clean energy and it doesn't feel like it's a drag, it's actually easier to lean in and to do a much better job and to change your whole relationship with the actual business so you can do more of what actually you want to do to make a dent in the world.
You speak a lot about turning ADHD from a liability into a competitive edge. What does that actually look like in real life?
Yeah, so I would say that the things that tend to be thought of as ADHD traits, the sort of the big picture thinking, seeing problems that other people can't see, being able to like look at things and see the interconnectedness and patterns, it's very hard to actually hire people in your business who have all of those types of traits. There's not exactly a market of low wage people you can bring in that have those traits. On the other hand, so if you are one of these people, like that is an amazing gift. And for those things where we might have weaknesses, generally speaking, those are often things that we can bring in other people to support us. So in some ways, for whatever challenges we might have, I'd much rather be that person who is that big picture thinker, the visionary, sees exactly what needs to be done, is willing to take the risks, than I would be somebody whose only skill is just checking off boxes on a piece of paper.
Why do you think so many high level entrepreneurs with ADHD like burn out or stall out before reaching the next level?
I think that there is a place where if you are at the lowest levels of a corporate organization, if you're purely just taking orders, you show up and tell you exactly what to do. That's a path that people with ADHD can often survive in. I think if you're at the highest levels of the organization, if you're Richard Branson, who talks openly now about ADD and dyslexia, it's pretty easy to organize your business around how to live in your zone of genius. You can just start an airline and decide if you're kind of done with airlines for a while, you can do something else. On the other hand, if you're somebody who's kind of at that mid-level where you don't quite have a lot of a team that's built around you and you're still in charge of everything, if you haven't found systems and solutions, that is often where people burn themselves out because they're not victims. So they're going to do the work, they're going to push through and get things done. But the cumulative impact of making your whole business run by that push energy leads to burnout. And when we get burnt out, our executive function declines. Some people report like they have trouble being articulate. Their level of focus declines. And when that declines, then of course we just have to push harder and it gets into a vicious cycle. So it's a pretty common trait amongst folks that I work with.
Ezra, what inspired you to get into this line of work? It's fascinating and your wealth of knowledge. How did you get started?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it was going through my own journey and realizing that a lot of the folks out there, there were two types of people. One were people who were neurotypical productivity experts, the Brian Tracy's of the world, of like, and the thing of why trying to follow that type of advice didn't work was because it's to solve a problem that we don't necessarily have. We're not lazy people who've never thought about making a to-do list. That's not what's going on. And then the other type of folks out there were often people who were well-meaning medical professionals who didn't actually know what it is like inside this mind. And so what I wanted to do is to help people go through that same journey I did of what does that actually look like when you're not a victim, you're not somebody who defines yourself by labels, but you're the type of person who's like, okay, I got something to overcome. Maybe I didn't know for the first 30, 40, 50 years, 60 years of my life, and now I do, and I'm going to do something about it. And I wanted to create a place where we could do it, fix those challenges that are holding back your business forever, and then have it done, right? Because there's so much potential, so much like integrity that sometimes we feel that we can't access. And that sort of kills me inside of like, it's a pure chance for people to like really be the person they know they can be.
What's the most surprising transformation that you've seen from a client that was struggling with ADHD when they came in?
Yeah, I can think of somebody who I was just working with a few weeks ago, named Stephen, who his previous path was he was finding himself at 40 years old visiting the doctor saying, like, I think I have dementia. Like, I cannot explain why my memory has declined to this extent. I cannot explain why I'm finding all of these things so hard to do. And what we were able to do, working with him, is like when we got through that neurodivergent burnout, again, it was, it's one of those things that can happen very quickly of what goes into a vicious cycle. But the flip side is true as well, is we get into a virtuous cycle, which is if we can find new ways of doing things, we don't burn out. When we don't burn out, our creativity returns, our focus returns, our memory returns, and that keeps building and building and building. And now sort of he's at a spot where, I mean, he still has ADHD, but he's no longer in that spot of sort of like going to the doctor's office going, what's wrong with me?
Terrific. Ezra, before I ask you my last question, is there anything that I didn't think to ask you that you feel is important to share with folks out there in the business community, perhaps struggling with ADHD?
Yeah, I think the thing that's important, and I'll deliver a really hard truth here, which is that there is no magic pill. There is no quick fix. There is no sort of learn these 5 hacks and things are going to be different. It's kind of like learning that we have diabetes. Like if we have diabetes, okay, there's certain things we can do. And if we take it seriously and we manage it, we're going to be okay. And if we do it, we wouldn't try to go through our life just being like, okay, I have this magic hack, I have this magic planner. It's not the planner, it's us. The things we can do, if we do the work, follow what others have done, we can get very similar results.
How can folks listening that would like to connect with you, how do they find you, connect with you, and learn more?
Yeah, so I on our website, the ADHDtools.com, we have a video that talks about what that actually looks like to do this work in a systematic way, where we figure out what's actually holding you back. How do you actually get a game plan for each of those areas? Some people with ADHD, ultra decisive. Some people with ADHD, ultra indecisive. There is no one size fits all plan. So we talk about what that looks like in an adult, how we get through the shame, how we get through all of those pieces. And if at the end of that you decide that it's something that you're actually interested in addressing at this point in your life, there's more information about how we can do that together, or you can go and take that plan and do it on your own.
Ezra, this has been terrific. I really appreciate you taking the time to share with my audience today, and I wish you continued success for you and for all of your clients.
Thanks so much, Mark.
That was Ezra DeWolf. I'm Mark Imperial. That's all for now. We'll see you again next time. Take care.